Okay.
There we go. Wonderful accent. We'll make a start, if we may. A small but very select and defined group.
Elite select. Okay, no worries. Right. So, considering the amount of people here, questions at any point, then don't worry, just butt in and we'll go through. So, as most of you know me anyway, but I thought I was going to give just a potted history of who I am. And it was, so I've worked in conservation for 30 years now. So, basically, as a contractor, consultant, but primarily working for sort of Natural England and its legacy bodies for the last 25 years, so covering, as I said, agri-environment for the sort of start of my career, for sort of 20 years, and then and managing the teams for Natural England in sort of Avon and Wiltshire, and sometimes Somerset. And the last few years, I've been working on the Triple SI program, so sites of special scientific interest, and linked mainly to the 25-year environment plan targets, which sort of inform the our current Environment Act. So what I was going to run through, and like I say, chipping at any time, was it's annoying. Was oh, where was I? There we go. Was just sort of going through the sort of Environment Act and the political drivers and the rhetoric behind it, what it might mean for us in the area, in the parish, Bremhill, Hill Martin, Calm Without, Chippenham, all the sort of parishes associated with the Marden and the Avon, some of the ecological components. And I was going to focus on what we've been doing in Bremhill for the last 3-4 years, or not, as the case may be. So so the political drivers. This was some time ago, pre-COVID, and we started working and informing the 25-year environment plan, which was then translated into the Environment Act, published in November 2021. So Natural England and other organisations had teams working on this, contributing to it, but it's taken rather a long time to sort of come to fruition. And at a regional level, so Wiltshire Council embedded some of the nature recovery strategy elements into the networks for green and blue spaces, and that the picture to the right is sort of showing the area around Cairn and the corridors linked to sort of to blue being river and green sort of hedge networks or habitat networks. So these have been identified, and Wiltshire Council has started moving forward with this. But like I sort of said previously, no action could actually be undertaken without the Environment Act and its associated targets. Now, these targets have now finally been released. They were published in the Environmental Improvement Plan in December 2023. It highlights the sort of the key delivery against the 25-year goals. So the goals will take us up to 2042. So you can probably work out that the plan started quite a few years ago, but hasn't really moved forward. We've got a lot of sort of interim targets which they've given us for 2028, which lots of organisations have been involved in. So, primarily the DEFRA organisations, so Natural England, the Environment Agency, Forestry Commission, and other sort of ENGOs, which are the environmental non-governmental organisations, the water companies, quite a few other organisations. Along it, there's a much stronger focus on the governance and monitoring and evaluation of the targets. So currently we'd report sort of every year. We'll be working towards, or Natural England will be working for some of the aspects, particularly relating to actually my target, which is very specific to triple SIs. And so we'll be reporting on a monthly basis on progress and where we're moving to. But the whole thing is quite complicated. And I'll not go into the detail of the improvement plan or the Environment Act, but it sort of covers a huge aspect of what everybody does, sort of from green finance, green jobs, greening government commitments, making green choices, the new farming schemes which have come out, and the sort of biodiversity net gain linked to planning, which you may or may not be aware of, but hopefully you can ask questions if you don't. So nature recovery, and like I said, we've been waiting for a while for this, but it's the nature recovery strategies. It's meant to be a sort of bottom up approach coming from us that are involved on the call, from councils, and probably ownership will involve locally will be down to sort of Wiltshire County councils leading on this, or providing funding and sort of coming up with more strategic funding plans. Like I said, the bottom up approach, and it's really about understanding our environment, understanding the opportunities, understanding the solutions, and working together, of which hopefully a lot of people on this call are already involved in. So underpinning nature recovery, there will be local nature recovery strategies, and that's what Wiltshire Council should be standing on over. My feeling it doesn't have to be just down to them. It's down to us, because we want to do what's right. As I said, there's been people in post. Natural England have developed. There's about 5 pilots which started about 3 years ago. So the outcomes of the pilots have sort of been shared. You can get to it on gov.uk, and I can sort of provide links later on. But we couldn't go any further. Although they all made common sense and things were tested, things were working, not working. We couldn't actually fund anything further than the pilots. We've got people in place within Natural England nationally. I'm more in the delivery aspect, so whilst I work in a national team, we'll have nature recovery staff then moving into the national delivery teams, and there's already teams embedded in the local Wiltshire team. So there's specific staff, senior advisors and delivery staff who will work closely with Wiltshire Council to help develop strategies and push out nature recovery to the wider population. Realistically, some of us are already doing it. I already started moving forward with this about 3 years ago post-COVID, and then COVID sort of brought a halt to it. So it's my only bit of volunteering. I've only been paid to deliver conservation, which isn't brilliant, really, when I should be doing it because it's what I believe in and it's happening in my own parish. So we're already doing things. There's a lot of organisations out there, yourselves involved in Friends of the River Marden and etc. There's also a lot of tools out there to help to enable us to develop strategy and understanding our shared objectives a bit more. So people can be polarized or quite focused on a particular specialism or idea or concern. But the sort of recovery strategies around trying to work across all of them and trying to pull something together. Wiltshire Council developed a nature recovery strategy tool, which was funded by Natural England, actually, who had seed cord funding. And the tool's very good, but it provides you with a brief framework for how you might sort of tackle developing a strategy. So we've got, again, Natural England hosts it. There's Magic Map, which has all the data layers for the land-based schemes or the priority habitats, the designation. So all that information is in one place. And so you can overlay the various bits of data to give yourself an idea of what you might have in a given geographical space. There's recent applications designed to help farmers, something called Land App, which is, I think, fairly cheap, but it also pulls all these data sets down and enables individuals, organizations, farmers to do their own mapping in a very simple, straightforward way. So you can start collaborating with whomever to then start developing a strategy. Linked to that, Natural England have actually linked to habitats, particularly. There's a Natural England. This isn't a Natural England promotion thing. It's just that's what we get paid to do, and I happen to work for them. But Natural England have host an ecological network. I don't know if I've got it up here actually. Let's see. I know. So it helps you identify ecological networks. I think I've got a slide linking on to that. So where you've got habitats, where you can link to them, and where the best opportunities are for enhancing, connecting, and developing networks. So it's much simpler to share these things on a map or a picture rather than a spreadsheet. So one of the things around the data isn't always correct. So particularly around priority habitats, things change over times. The condition of a habitat changes. Part of the thing around nature recovery strategies are engaging with whomever, everybody that we know, from ecologists to volunteers on the ground, mapping what we might have and validating the habitats and species which are there. Start mapping it and developing a strategy. I've got a question there. Do we have to wait? Are we kicking the can down the road, as Robert asked the other day? I don't think we are. I think we've got it's getting prepared for things that are happening, but have taken rather a long time to weed their way through the various government departments and get sign off from ministers. But we don't have to wait. We can keep going forward, making informed decisions on how we might want to develop in the future. One of the previous, so this is talking about species really and habitats. The Marden's got, it's a reasonable catchment, but it covers, as hopefully you're aware, the chalk to the cheese. So where we've got quite distinctly different landscapes managed in different ways. So we've got to the south, we've got on the downs, the Cheryl Downs, where the chalk starts. We've got really important species such as corn buntings and lapwings. That's where their habitats are. That's where they nest. But also, as we go much further to the north, the other side of the catchment, we start approaching sort of the Avon side up towards Bradenstoke, etc. We've also got lapwings. We've got lapwings in the parish of Bremhill, and some are nesting. And we've got, more important, we've got curlew that occur. So there's a wide range of species covering a gap in the middle, which could be, if you look at something like marsh fritillaries, they occur on Pusey Downs, they occur at Morgan's Hill. Hopefully, you know the geography of the area, but also in the sort of northern Wiltshire sort of neutral grasslands. There used to be marsh fritillaries there, so there's opportunities to link and join up these things. Other species which range from sort of in decline to at risk are a vast range of bats that inhabit the area, that either roost or they've got hibernaculars or maternity roosts. So they'll be associated with the Avon, the hedges, the grasslands. They've all got quite distinct foraging and habitat requirements. So from rough grassland to, like I said, to the hedges, to the river, some feeding on small fish. So it's understanding how they use. And you could say they were the keystone species across our landscape, which connect the habitats and the other species. Yeah, the importance of the habitats, the woodlands, the hedges, the grassland, the water, and the arable. The arable, again, we do know there's some rare arable species. You know, without the arable, you won't get the corn buntings and lots of our other rare species. So there's an interaction between everything that we walk through on a daily basis. The benefits of trees and woodland, and I think this relates. And I must thank John Harris. I pinched one of his slides from a recent Bremer Hill biodiversity slide that trees sequester carbon for improving air quality, habitats for fungi and invertebrates, protection for birds and animals, food for a myriad of organisms, helping with natural flood management, public and community space, and visual well-being. I mean, I suppose trees is one of the reasons why I first sort of joined and started thinking about connectivity and working across the parish, was because I went to a meeting and somebody said, we want to plant trees everywhere. And it's like, hold on, you've got to be careful. It's right tree, right place. It depends on your species. The last thing you want to do is plant trees where you've got nesting lapwings, or you've got already important areas of grassland or other habitats which aren't suited to it. But it's there, and it's an understanding of where you can, what you do, and getting the advantage. And I don't know, getting the most out of it. So again, this is a slide from John Harris, which is great. These are the threats that are affecting us. So it's not just the Marden. The Marden catchment, as you're aware, runs right the way through Bremer Hill parish as well as Calne parish. So the biggest threats to us are habitat disturbance, especially threatened species, including water voles, otters, the Holt's feeding territory, due to the proximity of new housing, commercial land development. The impact of flooding caused by extreme rainfall due to acknowledged climate change and increase of hard surface runoff. Invasive plant species to the waterways, Himalayan balsam, Japanese knotweed. Threats by an expanding population of muntjac deer, but also, you've got fallow deer up at Bowood, and if the roe populations aren't kept in check, the same issues can happen. Mink numbers that are affecting fish stocks, the loss of hedgerows and trees on wildlife corridors. That's been a major consideration when evaluating siting of large solar farms, which may have occurred recently. Commercial and domestic use of pesticides and herbicides, vehicle emissions, and the lack of funding to halt the decline of wildlife and natural habitat as it spirals at an alarming rate. So yeah, those are the threats. You'll know your own threat. You know area. There's more threats than that. Opportunities. There are opportunities through various planning linked biodiversity gains, but we need to be more sensitive to land development planning, which can also create a positive solution for wildlife recovery without a loss of natural wildlife habitat. But it's also identifying where wildlife recovery can be. Improve wildlife well-being through connectivity, identifying sites for grassland, neutral meadows, and we've got some little, the chalk areas, the woodlands, increasing corridors, riparian strips, which are the vegetation adjacent to water courses. And the most important things for the rural area of the Marden is supporting farmers, developing best practice, and giving them the information to sort of make the best decisions, which to some extent will be linked to funding, but it's giving them the information to make the right decisions, or an informed decision. We've got opportunities here to plant sort of upstream of floodplains, Chippenham being key one in point, and promoting the health, engaging people, education, kids, children, I should say, families, and everybody everybody in between. It's also developing your database in citizen science. It's it's reporting, and there's various apps and ways that you can report sightings, start thinking about monitoring the habitats that are there. There's organisations such as the Wilson Parks Canal, which they're geared up towards water, and they can help develop sort of blue and green corridors. Various initiatives, including with BART, about improving the in-stream habitats of rivers. So it's a lot of the agro-environment schemes which farmers have been linked to are primarily aimed at the wider land management and often deal with in-river type restoration. And Visions, a 200-metre wide recovery and protection corridor both sides of the River Marden, and a 100-metre buffer for other key waterways. And I think, if I'm right, that's included in some of the either parish or Wiltshire Council plans.
It's in the neighbourhood plan, Roger.
It's in the neighbourhood plan. Good.
For John Harrison, for us.
Okay, good. So what I'm going to run through a couple of. This is a sort of, I suppose it may have been a natural England style, but this is about understanding biodiversity and connectivity. So, 15 years ago, I started working on developing priority habitat plans for Forestry Commission and developing areas where they might want to recreate new woodland. And this is around sort of an old modelling type process, which was done actually by the Forestry Commission, but they didn't even realise they'd produced it themselves. And it's developing a way of connecting up, and this is how the ecological network things are based. And it's about identifying key bits of habitat and the land in between them. So if this was concrete in between, then you haven't got a great opportunity. But where you've got semi-improved grassland and you want to link unimproved grassland, that's a great starting point. And you might actually think, and it's looking at those different aspects of the habitat that you might cross to recreate species-rich grassland, which is actually quite a difficult thing to do sometimes, depending on what land you're trying to recreate it on. But it's understanding in a visual way of looking at where you might develop some opportunities for different species. Different species move at different rates, so it's identifying those opportunities. So there's lots of words on this slide, and it's basically giving a description of the zonation of where you might want to take these opportunities. And this will particularly possibly link to sort of planning and nature recovery in Net Cane, where planning might leave sort of large developments to sort of investing in mitigating developments. So I'll be looking at core areas. So the darker green will be woodland, the lighter green grassland. So it's looking across a much wider landscape and where you've got sort of the opportunities to make big wins. All this is available on Magic Map and Land App and all the various things out there. So everything we do within Natural England is shared pretty much straight away with everybody. It's out there for the local population. Right, I'm quite happy to take questions at the moment before I move on to sort of the Bremhill aspect of this.
Roger, I've got a couple of questions, if I may, and thank you very much for the presentation so far. The first is in terms of you set out the opportunities. And it's quite a long and extensive list, so you might just want to pick one or two. But what are the barriers? What are the reasons that we may not be able to achieve those opportunities?
So we're in a rural landscape. So, and a lot of what we've got, where the connectivity exists is within farmland. So a farm is a business which may have been which is developed over hundreds of years, perhaps. So you could say, right, we need to introduce sheep grazing or stop sheep grazing or introduce cattle, stop intensively farming this bit of land. And you've got to think that actually it may not be possible. You can't just stop a major business from carrying on. You've got barriers from, I suppose, the opportunities are linked to funding quite often, and it's the prioritising of funding to certain areas of activity, I suppose. So if I picked through each of those, I could come up with an answer. Opportunities for woodland. We've got ash dieback, and it's looking at the best thing to do there. I mean, it's all right planting woodlands, but even these trees need substantial funding to deliver that. At this moment in time, I don't think perhaps that planting woodland provides the financial incentive for farmers to take this on. So yes, a myriad of things, and it's like some things. It may not be an opportunity tomorrow, but it may be an opportunity a year or 2 years time. And for me, it's actually trying to get a really good picture of what you've got, and as a farm changes ownership, then you think actually we can then introduce the idea and things change. So they're barriers, but not necessarily insurmountable. Tara.
Yeah, just to respond to the tree planting thing, and then I've got a question. It is a barrier, the cost, and obviously for a landowner, it affects the value of their land if they put trees on it. And we recognise that. So although there's quite healthy incentives to plant trees, that the grants I think run out after 15 years. So really, landowners are more likely to plant trees if it's not just about the money for them. It's because they want to think about future generations, and maybe they've got a part of a field that they're prepared to, sacrifice in a way in terms of finance to put trees on. And even these trees does work. Not only do we try to acquire land to plant trees on, we've also got a partnership project now, and hopefully we'll have more, whereby we planted trees on landowners' land, so they've retained the ownership. So my question was about the Wiltshire nature recovery tool she mentioned. Is that something that's available for everyone?
Yeah, it is. And basically the tool actually is just a link to describing what nature recovery is, and giving a link to various sites which provide you the can provide the data sets. It is like available. Such as Magic Map, such as the network stuff. There was a meeting, and it was piloted with Calm Without. So, Robert, were you there at the meetings when they were?
I was, Roger. Yes, I was.
And that was about trying to ask people to start ground truthing how you might want to go about ground truthing what was there on the various data sets. The meeting was a bit chaotic, I think, and not and whether that will be rolled out so we can engage across and actually work out with the plan and come up with a neighbourhood plan which is wedded to a local nature recovery strategy. But I think this is going to evolve over the next year. But realistically, in Bremhill, we can already access these things and understand how it all works. So that's something we can move forward to. And if people want to go through in more detail the various tools available, then I think I'm more than happy to sort of set things up and just go through all the various. Some of them are rather complicated and give you rather more information than you might want, really. But Robert, you've got a specific question, have you?
I have, yes. Oh dear, you've disappeared.
Have I?
Oh, there you go. I can see it. Right. Two things, Roger. The plans that you're talking about, this is going to evolve slowly over a series of years. This is not for next year. So these interlocking systems that you talk about on governmental level down to local level through to getting money through to farmers, this is not tomorrow. And I suppose I'm trying to address my own concerns about kicking the can down the road, as you know, I mentioned in a previous meeting.
Yeah.
So friends of Marden Valley, we've noticed that with a place where we normally see brown trout, the brown trout disappeared, and that's caused alarm amongst ourselves. It's in Quemmerford, down the Quemmerford Bridge, and so we're contemplating the idea of buying a fairly expensive bit of kit to do water monitoring ourselves. We've received the information from the EA, where the EA, for example, are cutting back on their monitoring. There was an area called the Abbot Brook we're particularly interested in. The EA last did surveys there in 2017. And so they're cutting back. And so if you like, in easy terms, citizen science has to fill the gap and take it on. We're thinking of buying this expensive bit of kit, which is about £6,000, and finding ways to fund that. And we would be mapping, if you like, you talk about ground mapping, we'd be water mapping the Marden Valley from Kelston down to Black Bridge. Once we have that information, where do we point it to, and how does that become shameless for action and for doing?
Right. Sorry, I've had a cough for a couple of weeks, so I will. So there's the Bristol Catchment Partnership.
Yep.
Okay, which Bart will be involved in, and they've got a funding.
They do.
They're open for funding at the moment. I think the
deadline. We're applying, Roger, for something else. Yeah.
Okay, so can they do it through that? And
I think we can get the toys. How do we use the information?
I don't know.
What?
I don't know, to be honest. Who do we? So have you spoken to? So whether you go EA, I suppose they won't be ready to use, depending on the information and what it relates to. I mean, is it and what's causing the issue? It'll be EA up there, won't it, rather than Wessex?
So yeah, they're the dominant force. Yeah.
So I think it will feed back to the Bristol Catchment Partnership, which the Wildlife Trust are members of, which you've got the EA, you've got Wessex and Bart are part of, and I think it's discussing with them and asking them the question, where are we going with it? I think it'd be good to do the whole of the Marden really and go for a big scale.
Yeah, we were happy to do that, Roger.
Okay, good, because I think that's what certainly from our perspective it's going to be quite important. What's important is it's going to be important in developing the baseline as well as trying to work out what the issue is and trying to work out actually if we put this intervention in, and it could well be that an intervention goes in at point A, B, C, wherever, if we can monitor the improvement to the water quality and this increase in species, then that's going to be quite important evidence. Now, and there could be wider funding streams available to improve this through Wessex, but I don't know at this point. But these are the sorts of things I think you start pulling together and thinking, right, this is where the threat is, this is the opportunity, what can we do about it? But how do we do it? Well, and it sort of goes on to how do we do it collectively and who takes ownership for it? Because at the moment, you're all working really well across different through just using the few Friends of the River Marden. We've got the farmer facilitation group. It's just like bringing all that together and trying to work holistically across a much bigger area. And that's what I think I'd like, probably covering it. And then that's what we want to identify and start looking at who does what, where, when, how, and who do we go to.
Okay, thank you. I've already emailed Simon Bart about it, and he hadn't had a reply yet, but he's usually pretty good.
Yeah, I emailed him just before this presentation, actually. Right. Oh, I know why that's not. Oh. Right. Okay. Moving on to Bremhill now. Originally, yeah, the idea came around, or I first started thinking about a local nature recovery strategy. And as far as Wiltshire Council was concerned, I was quite keen to get going as soon as possible, to the extent I was going to be funded to sort of produce the draft toolkit, but then there's a slight conflict of interest for some reason. So what I started doing was engaging with Brem Zero, which is really focused on Bremhill, parish of Bremhill, but it's looking at zero carbon and the links to the environment. And that was sort of, our first meeting was about 3 years ago. On the back of that, I sort of took the lead on the environmental side and started to start working, developing a brief local nature recovery strategy. And like I say, sort of COVID put a bit of a stop to that. So, but last year I started sort of getting more traction, started forming a steering group, and the steering group took control, and we started developing a farmer group, and then working towards facilitation. And sort of I'll run through facilitation in greater detail in a bit. We had a few guided walks, which were really good. So we had 2 walks along Ed Jones's land next to the River Marden, which is with some incredibly species-rich grassland. The MG5 neutral meadows, cut for hay meadows, which we would have probably typically seen along the Marden going all the way down to Chippenham. Completely different to the less species rich than the chalk grassland on the chalk, but yeah, incredible sort of number of species at Jones. I walked up to the Triple SI to see the grassland there, and then Nick Adams hosted a bird walk up at Spurt Hill, which was really well attended. It was absolutely brilliant. So that really sort of got some traction with local people. So there's a combination of farmers and individuals. So that was a great day. So also started looking at invasive species along the river, along the Carriage Brook, which runs along Bremhill. And I did a walk along there and discovered there's rather a lot more there than anticipated, and it wasn't a one-man band putting it out, and which has affects the Marden. So clearing invasive species from the Marden really starts at the top at Hill Martin, working down, otherwise you're wasting time. So that was last year. As we start moving forward, we've got a facilitation funding application at the moment, or I'm on the steering group, but we've got incredibly powerful steering group which is sort of steering things forward. Initially it was just going to focus on Bremhill. So what the facilitation funding is, it's about providing funding for a one-to-many type approach, where you bring together a group of farmers and providing events, doing all the administration, and the events are linked to key aspects of linked to the your natural character areas. So defined within countryside stewardship, which is the sort of primary funding for farmers to do beneficial environmental activities. So within it, there's some key objectives. So the key ones for Bremhill, or the area, was water quality, air quality, water management, priority of habitat, biodiversity of priority species, diversity and abundance. So it's covering quite a lot. The area in brown near Charlcote is Bremhill. The actual facilitation fund area now is expanded to the red boundary, so right over towards Sutton Bengor, down nearly to Chippenham, up towards Bradenstoke and Bushton. So very much the major part of the sort of cheese catchment which flows into the Avon. We've brought together 43 farmers, and oh gosh, I can't remember now, Tara, was it about 3,500 hectares? So quite a significant area of land. And what's quite encouraging, quite often those farms are contiguous, so they're not isolated. You're actually may have in the future, if we can all work the same way, or they have a shared set of objectives, that we can really make a difference on the wildlife corridors and expanding and protecting the habitats associated with the catchment. The other thing is, as I've mentioned, the invasive species identification and eradication. That's something that we're quite keen in looking at. On the right, my right, your right, is Himalayan balsam, which is, there are stands as dense as this in parts of the Cowage Brook. I don't know if you recognise the invasive species on the left, but that's a signal crayfish, which was captured in the Cowage Brook, and in the middle of that Spanish bluebell. So again, there's a sort of myriad of species around about the place. So it's identifying them and then trying to work out ways to eradicate them. So that's what we'll be working on the next few years. And Robert and others will be joining me in surveying the Himalayan balsam along the Cowage Brook and then coming up with a cunning or not so cunning plan. What we look at in just extent just to Bramhill, it's nature recovery is about engaging everybody. I didn't organise this. This is someone local who's they were looking at the Cowage and looking at trapping invertebrates, looking at fish species along the Cowage, which I didn't think there was many in, because it's quite free flowing and tends to sort of clean out most of the time, clean whatever species are out there most of the time. So what we want to start doing is trying to set up events where we can engage with more than just the retired middle class individuals that are the sort of typical interest groups for biodiversity and conservation. So it's really trying to expand in the village, taking opportunities to engage sort of multi-generationally and actually start developing skills around what might float people's boats, their personal interest, and what we need to do. I think you're much further ahead than us in the parish, perhaps on with Friends of the Mid-River Marden, so we're a bit further behind in that aspect. So I think it's working together, learning from each of our experiences and pooling the best resources. That's a slide again from John about who's operating in the area. Brem Zero, I mentioned, which is looking at a lot more than just biodiversity. I mean, it's looking, and nature recovery isn't just about the biodiversity, it's the wider things that impact on nature. Wiltshire and Berks Canal Trust, the River Warriors, Friends of the River Marden, Bristol Avon Rivers Trust, who are a charity organisation, Avon Needs Trees, Bramhill Parish Council, and the Bramhill Vale Farmers Group, who haven't quite got a logo yet, but I'm sure one's under development. So, yeah, the question that affects us in the parish of Bramhill, the parish of Bramhill has a boundary, habitat speak. Sorry, Tara, I'll just pause quickly there for you to ask your question.
It was a shameless plug actually for Avonese Trees, and because you mentioned multi-generation engagement, Avonese Trees are trying to do that as much as we can, and we've got loads of events coming up. So please encourage everyone you can think of, families, etc., to get involved and sign up to our events, which are all free. So we've got forest schools, we've got Haze Fest coming up where there'll be activities for children. Wellbeing days, pollinator event, a foraging event. So yeah, I think that trying to appeal to as many people as possible, not just, as you say, the retirees.
Yeah, and I think so. Speaking to Robert, the things that you do with the Friends of the River Marden, trying to develop things from scratch in Bremhill. Like I said, the boundaries of our respective parishes around aren't barriers to species and habitats, and I think the local nature recovery, local nature strategies gives us an opportunity to find an umbrella to cover a lot more. And if we can really sort of engage with the farmers and support them in making the right decisions for us, for them, informed decisions based on best available data and the opportunities available to people. So working as individuals, so working over you trying to get the Friends of the River Marden getting funding for one monitoring station where the likes of Wessex, and they're trying to engage with as many people as possible. So the Bremhill farm, they've got 43 farmers they can deal with at once. Whereas if they came into the catchment themselves, they'd have to deal with 1, 2, start organising things. That facilitation group, that group of farmers is already there as an audience. They've signed up. They've got to have a couple of events every single quarter, which they should attend, and some of it will link to things like farming infrastructure, sharing machinery, understanding habitats, understanding carbon, understanding biodiversity net gains and the opportunities that are there. And then trying to find out I've seen the Friends of the River Marden, the sort of strategic, the objectives, and I think they look pretty good. And it's looking at, can we look a bit wider than that at the wider catchment? Because it should be fairly, there's massive synergies there, and it should link to like I said, the right parent strips and grassland recreation, hedgerow planting. It's something that extends much further than the 200 meters adjacent to the Marden. It extends to the Cader Burner, the Cowage Brook, which all have the Avon, which all have very distinct their own habitat. So we won't get water voles on the Cowage just because it flows too quickly in spate, or just drown the water voles. Whereas the Cader Burner and the Avon, you've probably got better opportunities for recreating habitats along there. But I'd sort of, as just a volunteer, and I'm not part of a parish council, it's like, how can we sort of pull it together? How can people pull it together as a wider strategy and become a lot more inclusive? And it's developing people's interest and what floats their boats. There's a lot of skilled individuals with particular skill sets in the area, which sometimes don't want to be part of a wider group, but be quite happy wandering along with their dog or on their own with their family, and can identify species or habitats and sort of monitor progress. And it's about engaging, and who's going to take responsibility for that. So that's it. So
Roger, thank you very, very much indeed. Again, I'm sure there are more questions. A question about the landowners, the farmers group. I suppose 2 questions. One is how, not these things are ever easy, but how easy it was to bring those landowners together. And 2, under what auspices? Is it under Natural England, or is it under the parish council? I'm just wanting to understand what the mechanism was that brought people together.
So basically, although it's in our biodiversity report, I went out on my own, really. Although I checked in with the parish council and said, look, I'm doing this. And John Harris and Isabel were called and sort of ran through what I was doing and trying to link things together. The initial concept of, I suppose I had a refresh of the nature recovery strategy type approach with a Brem Zero meeting, which a couple of Victorian Nye and Jill Jones, sort of local farmers, John Satchel, so a few farmers, and so 4 or 5 farmers attended that meeting, and then it was right, okay, we want to make a difference. What do we do, and how do we get it together? Steering group formed, and it went from there. Now, I think the success of the steering group was I didn't lead it. The success of it was I provided guidance, which I've done in the past with it. So my interaction with steering with facilitation group goes back 10 or 15 years, and I worked for the government, and the approach was it's not up to me to tell you what to do. You might not trust me. I work for essentially DEFRA, Natural England. It's not about that. I will just give you whatever guidance. I've got staff in place that will give you the advice. So the key thing to do is not to tell landowners what to do. It's for them to make the decisions about what interests them. So it's having the farmers engaging with the other farmers. So Victoria and I is quite she's very good at connecting with different people. It's engaging with a good facilitator. So Simon Sparks facilitates the Pusey Downs group. When we had a meeting with the farmers, it was soon clear that everybody lots knew Simon. So within your steering group, somebody trusted somebody who knew they could do the right thing. And because it was farmers working together, one farmer influences another. I took my dog down to the kennels farm there. No, we're not interested in collaborating. I said, we've got a meeting. No, we don't do it. We don't do it. We just work within our boundaries. They turned up at the meeting, and it's like, well, we haven't seen them for 20 years. We've never. So it's about getting, once you get two, I think we may have too many, but I think it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. As we start moving forward with this, it's them incentivizing each other, and nobody pushed them into it. And it's about sharing experience and the ability to access funding in the future and working together. So hopefully we'll be successful with the application. If not, then it will still go forward as a farmer group. There's enough of us there to provide the information they might need or they want to make informed decisions. And that's the way the agro-environment schemes is. The basic payment scheme disappears. This is where part of their funding will come from in the future.
Roger, just quickly, is it scalable in the sense of, could we have, or are there groups similar to this dotted around the country, or is there a way of scaling
Wiltshire?
It,
So Wiltshire basically, I think, has 25% of all facilitation funds in the country. So it all started. So Marlborough Downs was the original nature improvement area. So it was a pilot about trying to work in the landscape. Then it became making space for nature, and then it started kicking up the facilitation groups. They have a defined carrying capacity, as it were. If you have too many, it gets very difficult to organize and manage. And what you need is what's scalable realistically is the common theme around habitats and farming systems. So you will have a joint interest in things. It's not that you can't break off and do your own things, but it's good if you have shared objectives that everybody can sort of work towards. Jill's on the call, sitting quietly listening to me now, I notice. I don't know if you've got anything to say about it. Maybe not.
Possibly not. I think Robert's got a question though. Robert.
Robert.
Go on, Rob.
It's great the work you're doing, Roger. I'm going to ask an impertinent question. You have to slap me down if I've got it wrong. And it's great the work you're doing with Jill, who is on the call but not listening, and Victoria, and just to push all this thing forward. And the fact you've got 44 correspondence partners is very, very good. Now, that's all kind of top level that you're dealing with there, Roger. And I'm trying to deal with things kind of at the bottom. We're a bottom-up.
Yeah.
How do you do? And this was inferred in the strategy that, in fact, was written by Jeremy. How do you deal with something like Roundup? Now, Roundup is something that's used by farmers and it's used by gardeners. It's across the spectrum. Roundup kills birds, kills weeds, kills birds, and kills a lot of invertebrates as well. And we all know that it's not very good stuff for the environment. So if you're talking about habitats and wildlife, then maybe one of the moving points could be a questioning glycophosphates. But how does that fit into your perspective? Is that too dangerous and you keep well away from it? Or is that something?
No, I mean, that's part of the, that'll be part of the, as we go forward, sort of working with pesticides, nutrients, it will be, which will link to water quality at the end of the day. That will be part of it. So we can't tell people to stop doing it, but what you can help is that you're providing a forum where it can be discussed and you look at alternatives to doing it. And I think this is, like you mentioned about the private individuals, it's down to people in the gardens, and it's a joint effort. It's, I suppose, right, I think with legislation and the targets associated with the environment improvement plan and a 25-year targets, the government will take a while to make these decisions. So there'll be political pressures outside of the conservation sector to do certain things. So there'll always be a sort of a slightly polarized approach to some of these things. But that's not to stop us moving forward and developing a strong baseline and a knowledge base, and helping people to think, whether it's informed decisions for a farmer or for local individuals. So I'm really glad that Jill and Victoria have sort of taken this forward, and it might give me the opportunity to sort of think about how we start working with nature recovery strategies and how do we put it together. But I think rather than Bremhill working on its own, we can look at things like this across
so practically, would you be doing workshops on Roundup and the alternatives, or is that too close to precise, Roger?
I can't remember what we've got factored in, to be honest. But it'll be part of it going forward. But I'm not sure as to. So this will be a 3-year program. So it'll be 3 years, and we've scoped out, and I can't remember what we've got included, but pesticides will be part of the conversation.
Okay. Because the government have said they're not going to do anything about it till 2042, isn't it?
Well, that's the
that's
science and actually doing something about it. So it's very difficult to sit and think legislation will come around the corner, like you say. It's like, oh yeah, we need to do something about it. Now the rhetoric around the political rhetoric, they've been talking about the Environment Act for 5 years. When in that 5 years, there's been a significant decline already to species, habitat, and water quality, whereas the information behind it that informed the environment was already there. So I think as local individuals, it's now incumbent on us to try and start, or me.
Yeah, I agree, Roger. It's down to individuals, that we can't rely on the government.
And I think just coming up with a local nature recovery strategy, a local one, it doesn't have to be funded. You've got the individuals, you can get the buy-in. The neighbourhood plans from Bremhill and from Calm Without have captured lots of the things that are common sense and we need to do. So I think it's engaging with the parish council, but it's not for me to say, right, I'm going to march forward with it. Now I think it's the engagement with the with local sort of administration, such as the parish councils, to start work out the best way of taking it forward. And if funding's available, then great, but we want to put it to the right place and not waste it.
More questions for Roger? Any more questions for Roger?
Yeah. Okay.
Roger, thank you very much indeed. Can I also take the opportunity to thank Avon Needs Trees, who are such a fantastic support, and Tara in particular for setting up this evening's meeting. Any last opportunities for questions? Roger, I found it really fascinating because every one of these Zoom meetings, I actually learn a lot, because I come at it from a completely point of ignorance, and I leave feeling as though I'm slightly less ignorant than when I started. So, Roger, thank you very much for that. Thank you for everybody who came. Anything else that, Tari, you want to say in terms of events and activities?
I've done my plug. But thank you so much, Roger. That's really, really interesting to talk.
Yes, I enjoyed it. Anything from friends from Marden Valley, Robert, that you want to?
Just to say thank you very much to Roger. I really enjoyed it as well. I'll just copy exactly what Tara said.
Excellent, Roger. Again, thank you very much. Thanks to everybody who came this evening, and I'm sure we'll see you again for another fascinating Zoom evening. Thanks, everybody.
All right,
Thanks, Ian. Bye-bye.
Goodbye now.
Bye-bye.